Welcome back to the channel. This is going to be part 9 of the MK2 1.8t build, and in this video we're going to be installing your ECU. We're going to be going over what you need to do to it to get it to work with the 1.8t and the MK2. Next, we're going to be going over what battery cables you want to use. Next, we're going to be making sure all of your wiring is plugged in correctly. And finally, the time has come. We're going to be starting the engine for the first time. So starting with the ECU, when you pick up your 1.8t engine, if you're tearing it out of a car or you're going to, pick it up from someone that you bought it from, just try to get that ECU with that engine. If you don't, it's no big deal. You can do what I did. I found already a tuned and deleted ECU online for way cheaper actually than if I had to do that stuff myself. Okay, so you have your ECU now. So the number one thing you need to get done is have the immobilizer deleted. If you do not get it deleted, it's not gonna work with the 1.8t and the MK2. There's a couple of guys on Facebook that can delete it. Obviously you can go with some of the bigger companies like United Motorsports or APR. While you're getting the immobilizer defeated, obviously you could go stage 1, stage 2. There's a whole bunch of other options you can have done to your ECU while they have it. Okay, so depending on where you're putting your ECU in your MK2, most people put it up here in the rain tray. Some people put it in the car. So I have mine just up in the rain tray. Make sure this part is pulled all the way out. Press it in there and then you press the back, snaps it in. Other side, make sure it's open again. Press it on and then you push and it snaps it in. Okay, so now that we have this all connected, everything's hooked up, I'm just gonna set it in here. Okay, so moving on to battery cables. So this is something you don't need to do, but with changing to a Mark IV engine, a Mark III transmission, and a Mark III gas tank, it kind of feels to me common sense to upgrade your battery cables from the outdated Mark II ones to some nice Mark III ones. So these are Mark III battery cables, and with those, when you take them off your Mark III car, make sure you kind of look where you're taking them off. It's going to be the same thing when you put these back on. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on, making sure you have everything plugged in you need to get the engine to start. So the first thing I wanted to go over is with the battery cables. Obviously we need power from the battery to get this engine to start. So for the positive side, VDub's very good at identifying the power wires and then the ground wires. The ground wires are always brown, the power ones are always red. So from the positive terminal side, you have 2 red wires from your Mark II. You have a bigger gauged black one that's going to be going down and hooks on to your starter. Then you have one more from the engine harness that stayed on the engine that has one bigger gauge wire, and if you follow that around, it goes all the way to your alternator, which makes sense. Your alternator is sending power to keep your battery charged. So that's the positive side. On your negative side, the bigger gauged wire, if you follow that, that's always going to be grounded somewhere on top of the transmission. Usually there is a bolt that has a smaller nut on it, and that's where you want to have it ground. And then the 2 brown ground wires from your Mark II, you just put those right on top. Okay, so now we'll be moving on to your plug and play wiring harness that we installed. So you have the harness plugged into the CE2 box in the Mark II. So coming out, you have one big, really big plug-in. If you didn't hear this snap into place, make sure you take it apart and snap it in. The next plug-in you need to make sure you have plugged in, or your engine is just going to keep turning over, it's never going to fire up, is this plug-in. I've seen it with different colors. This is a black with purple, and this is the white with red. You need to make sure you hear this snap. And from the harness that we put in, you need to make sure you have these 2 relays in there. You need to make sure the MAF is in, nice, you heard that nicely clip in. Then you have one more from the plug and play harness that, make sure you hear that snap. And this wire's just the wire going to the alternator. You just follow it. The plugins, they're only going to plug into, you know, one other thing. So that's on the plug and play harness. Okay, so now that we have everything hooked up, your batteries have all the proper grounding, have the power wires going to it. Okay, so we have our battery cables, everything's hooked up, the power to the Mark II, the grounding to the Mark II, our plug and play harness, our 4 plugins are plugged in, we have our relays, we have our MAF in. The last thing we want to make sure is we have power going to the starter. Okay, so if you unhooked anything else from the engine, make sure you have all that hooked back up. But if you have everything connected that I just showed you, now we're going to be moving on to starting the engine. Okay, so before you start the engine, I have kind of a checklist that I go down. First of all, is your gas lines hooked up, and are they hooked up correctly? Second, do you have your throttle body? Is it plugged in? Is it connected? Are your coil packs, did you take them out for some reason? Make sure they're all connected. Did you put fuel in the gas tank? Make sure your engine has oil. Don't worry if you don't have your intercooler piping all hooked up, it doesn't matter. Okay, moving on to the startup. So before we just put the key in there and let her rip, this is where you want to hear things turning on. If you don't hear a couple of these things turning on, you're going to have to, you know, trace it back, see if it's a fuse or a wiring issue, and figure it out. So before you put your key in, look at the dash. Do the lights turn on? You know, is there a clock? Is the clock turned on? If that all is turned on, you know there's power going to your dash. So the next thing I like to listen for is when you put the key in and you turn it, you listen for the fuel pump, you listen for the throttle body. When you turn that key, you should be hearing some ping, some whistles, some sounds coming from the fuel pump and the throttle body. So let's do that. So I put the key in, and you turn it and you need to listen. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I can obviously hear the throttle body. It's a really high-pitched little like whining sound. I also heard my fuel pump. If this is your first time turning a key, that fuel pump is going to be, you know, sucking up fuel into the fuel pump. My fan has turned on my heater box. So if you heard your fuel pump turn on, if you heard your throttle body, you know, make all those weird noises, I think it's time to turn the key. And I need to open up my garage so I don't kill myself here. So if you just turn the key there and it didn't start up, the first thing I like to look for is if you have a seat belt, that you have to plug it in to get your car to start. You know, if you don't have the seat belt plugged into some of these Mark IIs, it's not going to start. So check if you have that. So if you didn't hear something turn on, this is where you're going to need to troubleshoot. If you put that gas tank in, I would probably check the wiring. I'd check the fuse. You know, you need to hear that fuel pump turn on. The second thing we're listening for is the throttle body. If you didn't hear that throttle body turn on, we're gonna need to figure out, you know, why that throttle body didn't turn on. Okay, so this is the throttle body here. If you didn't hear this turn on, we need to figure out why you didn't hear this. So you're gonna need to troubleshoot. You know, make sure these connections are tight, take them off, put them back on. With the plug and play harness, if you didn't hear that snap, take them apart and put them back on. So, you know, when I first had this on here, my throttle body, I could not hear that. All I did was take a couple plugs off and I put them back on, and then it fired right up. Again, guys, I'm just trying to put something out there and hopefully it helps someone. Hopefully you got your engine started today. If not, please comment below if you have any questions, and you know, I or someone else that has done this swap before will help you out. But man, hearing that engine fire up for the first time just brought all this energy back up into me, so I'm really excited to now get going on kind of the tedious stuff, I feel like, just getting everything else on the car so I can drive it. Still a long ways to go, but I can't wait to be driving this. I hope this helps somebody. I'll see you guys next video.